Hello, and welcome. As you settle in and allow the quiet of the evening to embrace you, let your thoughts drift far away, beyond your room, beyond the stars, to a galaxy long past, and very far away. You've likely heard tales of the Jedi, cloaked in robes of neutral tones, wielding lightsabers that shimmered like crystal rivers. They walked with the bearing of monks and the discipline of warriors. They were called guardians of peace, protectors of justice, wielders of the Force. Their stories are filled with epic battles, destiny, and sacrifice. But amid the reverence, one seldom hears what it was truly like to live as a Jedi. Tonight, we'll travel slowly through the layers of their existence, see not the legend, but the lived reality, from austere daily routines to the deep loneliness of their path, from the stifling codes that governed every emotion to the political entanglements that blurred their purpose. So now, breathe in, let the sounds of the day recede. As the night wraps around you like a soft robe, we begin our quiet journey into why it really, truly, sucked to be a Jedi. Imagine yourself waking in a high chamber of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. The walls are smooth, sand-colored stone, cool to the touch. The air is still, faintly perfumed by cleansing incense, though it carries no warmth. Your bed is not a bed at all, but a firm sleeping mat rolled onto a raised platform, minimalist and unyielding. Comfort is not the goal, Herodiscipline is. This is your life, and has been since infancy. Taken from your family, though, the word family is never used. You were brought to the temple as a toddler, selected through genetic testing or psychic impression. There was no choice, no ceremony. The Jedi Order believed attachment led to fear, and fear to suffering. Best, then, that you not remember your mother's voice or your father's arms. Your day begins before the sun rises over the skyline. The temple's artificial lighting dims to a soft golden hue. Gently coaxing initiates awake. There is no alarm. You are trained to rise precisely on time. A meditation session comes first 20 silent minutes. Cross-legged on cold stone, eyes half-lidded, breath controlled. You are reminded to release all thoughts, especially those that stray toward longing or resentment. Breakfast is shared in a refectory that echoes with murmured conversations, though silence is encouraged. The food is nourishing, but bland. Synth root stew, vitamin wafers, warm broth, enough to sustain, never enough to indulge. Then come the classes, not joyful gatherings of discovery, but rigorous instruction in galactic languages, ethics, history, and the intricacies of the Force. You study battle stances, saber drills, and advanced telekinesis. Each motion is scrutinized by instructors who rarely smile. Discipline over flair, control over instinct. A typical lesson might involve lifting a sphere through a sequence of complex patterns, all while maintaining emotional neutrality. Pride at success is discouraged. Frustration at failure, punished with more meditation. As you grow older, you are paired with a master. This bond will define your life for years close, yet carefully distant. A Jedi is expected to love all life, yet form no attachments. The Master is your mentor, guide, and guardian, but never family. You are told this often. The days pass in a quiet repetition. There are few festivals, fewer days off. You do not mark your birthday. Celebration is considered a distraction. Holidays, Jedi, do not celebrate. Their joy is in balance, their peace in service. The Jedi Temple is vast, but not cozy. Its halls are tall and echoing. Statues of ancient masters loom in still alcoves, watching always. You walk them in silence, often alone. Conversation is subdued, and laughter, almost foreign. Evenings end as they began, with stillness. Another meditation, another lesson in detachment. As night falls, the city outside glows with the hum of life. Inside the temple, everything slows and quiets. You retire to your cell, unadorned, identical to all others. You are not to personalize your space. There are no photographs, no keepsakes. You stare at the ceiling, breathing rhythmically. You are trained to sleep lightly, ready to wake if called. Dreams are allowed, but rarely discussed. Emotions stirred by them must be examined, then released. This is the everyday life of a Jedi. Clean, structured, controlled, and utterly lonely. Not in the dramatic, cinematic sense, but in the quiet absence of things. No mother's lullaby, no soft plush toy, no inside jokes, no youthful rebellion, no room for want, or whim, or warm memory. There is serenity, yes, but also a still, persistent emptiness that many Jedi learn never to name. Let us now leave these silent halls behind and move on to glimpse the very individuals who walked them, the Jedi themselves, their stories, their burdens, and their quiet unraveling. Now imagine, for a moment, that you are Obi-Wan Kenobi, not the resolute knight from the films, but the boy before the battles. Born on the planet Stugen, you were brought to the Jedi Temple before your memories could form. You lived the quiet, austere childhood of every initiate halls, silent meals, silent questions. You trained with precision, spoke with restraint, and buried your desires so deeply that you almost forgot what it felt like to want. At 13, you were paired with a master, not by affection or preference, but by assignment. Your new teacher, Qui-Gon Jinn, was respected but unpredictable. His defiance of the Jedi Council unsettled you. Yet you followed him across systems and conflicts, learning not only the art of battle, but the art of doubt. Even as you grew stronger, the expectations grew heavier. Each mission demanded impossible restraint. You fought in civil wars where the line between justice and politics was faint and shifting. You were told to bring peace, but never intervene too deeply, to serve the Republic, but never question its motives. When Qui-Gon died cut down by a Sith you were unprepared to face, you did not cry. Jedi do not mourn. Instead, you made a vow, calmly and solemnly, to train the boy Qui-Gon believed in, Anakin Skywalker. Anakin, a prodigy, full of fire and conflict. He was powerful, yes, but also impulsive, emotional, deeply human. In training him, you were told to suppress your instincts to guide, but not comfort, to discipline, but not love. And so, even as Anakin called you master, what he craved was something you were forbidden to give, a father's warmth. Years passed. Wars erupted. You became a general in the Clone Wars, a title bestowed without ceremony. You had not asked to lead armies, nor trained to command troops, but the order had changed. Jedi, once peacekeepers, now wielded sabers on battlefields strewn with dust and smoke. You gave everything, obedience, discipline, years of your life. And when Anakin fell, when he became the very thing you feared, the order did not comfort you. There were no support systems, no one to ask if you were all right. You were simply expected to continue. And so you did. Into exile, into silence, into a desert cave on Tatooine, watching over the boy who would someday be the galaxy's hope. Watching, always, but never intervening. Never letting yourself become too attached. Now imagine you are not Obi-Wan, but Ahsoka Tano. You were a child when you were sent to the battlefield, a teenager, clad in warrior's armor, leading clone troopers twice your age. You questioned the council, you questioned orders, and in the end, they turned on you, accused you of treason, expelled you. When you were later proven innocent, they offered to let you return, but you refused. You had seen the cracks beneath the order's dignified mask, the hollow center behind its noble words, and so you walked away, not out of anger, but out of truth. These are only 2 lives among thousands. Mace Windu, stern and unyielding, trusted the council until the end. Yoda, ancient and wise, presided over the fall of the very system he had built. Count Dooku, once a respected Jedi, left the order when its politics clashed with his ideals and became the very enemy they warned against. Each Jedi bore a story not of epic triumph, but of quiet burden. They were not warriors of legend in their own eyes. They were guardians of a crumbling dream. They were forbidden to grieve, yet surrounded by loss. They were told to bring peace, yet constantly sent to war. They were trained to love life, yet forbidden to form bonds with it. And in the end, many died alone, not in glory, but in confusion, in betrayal, in silence. Let us now drift from their personal burdens to the lingering echoes of the past mysteries buried in time, and the culture that once held them sacred. Far beyond the gleaming spires of Coruscant and the battle-scarred fields of the Clone Wars lie the quieter echoes of the Jedi Order preserved, not in living memory, but in ancient halls and forgotten worlds. Picture the world of Ossus, once a verdant planet, Gentle with forests and wide skies, it became the site of the Great Jedi Library, not merely a collection of texts, but a living repository of Force philosophy, galactic lore, and esoteric knowledge. Carved into a gentle hillside, its stone corridors were lined with illuminated manuscripts, suspended holocrons, and dusty relics of civilizations now long vanished. Imagine stepping into this space. The light is soft, filtered through translucent stone windows. You hear nothing but the faint hum of energy fields, preserving fragile scrolls. The scent is dry parchment and ancient wood. Jedi archivists, cloaked in long robes, move in silence between shelves, their footsteps muffled by centuries of reverence. But Ossus was lost. A supernova's wave scoured the world, and the archives crumbled into ash and memory. Some texts were saved, most were not. Entire volumes of Jedi wisdom now exist only as fragments quoted in later teachings. As with many of their secrets, what was once known now drifts quietly into obscurity. And yet, whispers of their lost culture remain. There are the Kyber temples found on remote worlds like Jeddah and Ilum where Jedi once journeyed in silence to seek the crystal that would power their lightsaber. The pilgrimage was not about conquest, but surrender. Jedi were expected to hear the crystal's voice, no command it, but resonate with it. These caves were often deep, cold, and dark, lit only by the gentle glow of the Force-reactive crystals hidden within. Padawans would walk for hours, alone, sometimes days, meditating in silence, awaiting the moment the crystal would call to them. It was a test of patience, humility, and quiet resolve. The lightsaber itself, so often imagined as a weapon, was in truth a deeply personal construct. Every element, its shape, color, even the way it hummed reflected the inner world of its wielder. But this symbolism faded, as war demanded uniformity. In the later days of the Republic, few Jedi still crafted their sabers in the old ways. Most were issued by the Order in bulk, their spiritual essence dulled by efficiency. And what of the Jedi Code? It was not a prayer, nor a poem. It was a mandate etched into every stone wall of the temple, every daily lesson, every word spoken by a master. Its most well-known form read, "There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force." It sounds beautiful, like a gentle mantra, but imagine living by it every day, every hour, denying anger, love, fear, and joy, denying yourself. For many Jedi, the code was not guidance, it was a barrier between them and their own humanity. It was a culture of quiet suppression, of noble ideals, yes, but also of quiet suffering. Archaeologists and scholars in the post-imperial era have uncovered fragments of alternate codes, even whispered rumors that the original Jedi philosophy was more balanced, less austere, that perhaps the strictness of the High Republic Jedi was a late invention, a reaction to fear rather than a product of wisdom. This remains a mystery. The ruins are silent, the records are corrupted. The Jedi themselves, those who might have remembered, they're mostly gone. And so, Jedi culture lingers like dust in a long-abandoned archive, echoes of robes sweeping stone floors, the scent of incense burning before an empty plinth, hushed voices debating philosophy beside candlelight and starlight, all of it lost, or worse, buried by those who feared what it might have revealed. Let us now drift upward, from the forgotten past to the luminous present of the Jedi's public image, the contrast between their cloistered, sacrificial existence and the powerful elite status they projected to a galaxy watching from afar. From the bustling lower levels of Coruscant to the opulent courts of Alderaan, the Jedi were revered. To the average citizen of the Republic, they were mythical, figure serene, powerful, untouchable. Children played with carved wooden sabers, pretending to deflect blaster bolts. Parents told stories of Jedi riding into danger, cloaked in light, bringing peace. News feeds displayed them in crisp hologram stall and dignified, walking calmly amidst turmoil. A Jedi was not merely a person, a Jedi was a symbol. But behind the symbol was a human being, tired, conflicted, often uncertain. In public, the Jedi appeared at Senate hearings, galactic ceremonies, and diplomatic events. They stood at the periphery of power, ever silent, ever neutral. They wore simple robes in a room of jewels and gold, yet somehow commanded the most respect. Their status was immense, their privileges vast. They had access to restricted areas, special judicial protections, diplomatic immunity, and yet they were not free. Unlike senators or dignitaries, Jedi could not own property. They could not build wealth, hold office, or pursue relationships. Their public esteem brought no personal benefit. There was no home to return to at the end of the mission, no inheritance to pass on, no partner to hold in moments of doubt. When a mission ended, they did not retire to a private estate. They returned to the temple, to meditation, to solitude. The Jedi Code prohibited attachment, which meant even friendships were thinly stretched. Padawans bonded in training, yes, but those bonds were often discouraged or redirected. Emotional closeness was seen as a slippery path toward dependence, toward vulnerability. Still, the galaxy admired them, especially the upper classes. On planets like Naboo and Chandrila, young nobles spoke with longing about being chosen by the Jedi, not understanding that the life they envied was one of near total renunciation. They saw the polished surface, the lightsaber, the diplomatic gravitas. What they didn't see was the exhaustion behind the eyes, the quietly trembling hand after battle, the ache of enforced detachment. In the later years of the Republic, the Jedi became increasingly entangled with the Senate. They were asked to mediate trade disputes, suppress uprisings, even lead clone troops into war. Always impartial, always loyal to the Republic. But the Republic itself had grown sluggish, corrupt, manipulated by shadowy influences, and the Jedi were trapped. To defy the Senate was to betray their mandate. To obey the Senate was to abandon their neutrality. As wars flared, they became soldier-san identity they had not chosen. Their temples became barracks. Their robes became armor. Their sabersons, personal and ceremonial, became tools of death. To the citizens, they still seemed noble, but to themselves, many Jedi began to question. Whispers in the corridors of the temple, long, silent pauses during council debates. Even masters struggled with what they had become. The contradiction became unbearable. The galaxy saw gods cloaked in linen. The Jedi themselves saw prisoners of an unraveling purpose. And when the fall finally came, Order 66, swift and merciless, there was no public outcry, no mass mourning. The galaxy watched with passive acceptance. Perhaps, by then, it had already forgotten the humans behind the robes. Let us now shift, gently, to the personal consequences of this role, the inner cost of upholding such a demanding, often unlivable code. Imagine for a moment that you feel a pull, not the tug of duty, but something more subtle and more dangerous. The warmth of someone's presence, a shared glance, a hand briefly brushed during a mission. You are a Jedi, and this is not allowed. From the moment you first spoke in the temple, you were taught that love is a path to fear, and fear leads to darkness. Attachment, they say, clouds judgment. Compassion is welcome, but connection is perilous. The Jedi teach you to care for all, but belong to none. And so, many Jedi live in quiet, emotional repression. Some, like Master Luminara Unduli, exemplify the Order's ideal calm, detached, perfectly composed. She mourned her Padawan's death with a still face and no tears. She did not rage. She did not retreat. She simply meditated, then returned to duty. Others struggled. Obi-Wan Kenobi once admitted, softly and long after the fact, that he might have left the Order for Satine Kryze, the Duchess of Mandalore, had she only asked. Their affection was deep, but unspoken. One meeting, a brush of fingers, and then nothing. Decades passed. Their connection became a silent ache, carefully shelved behind diplomatic smiles. And then there was Anakin Skywalker, raised in slavery, taken late into the Order, never fully conditioned to suppress his feelings. He loved fiercely, protectively, and recklessly. Padme Amidala, senator, queen, idealist, was the embodiment of everything he admired. And so, in secret, they married. It was a dangerous fracture in the Jedi facade. Anakin's love became a weight he could neither confess nor share. The fear of losing Padme consumed him, and when premonitions of her death arrived, he found no comfort from the Council, no space for honesty, no place to grieve. The Jedi Order had no ritual for mourning spouses, no words for the loneliness of a secret family. For others, the struggle was quieter. Jedi who developed bonds with fellow knights often said nothing. They meditated longer. They trained harder. They told themselves it was nothing. But at night, in the stillness of their quarters, some held on to thoughts they were not meant to keep. The code's strictures did not erase emotion. They buried it. Buried things, of course, grow strange over time. What began as love could fester into obsession. What began as sorrow could thicken into guilt. And without the language to speak of such feelings, many Jedi simply carried them, like invisible burdens wrapped in linen. Even the act of mourning was regulated. Jedi were taught not to cling. When a friend died, you acknowledged their passage into the Force. You did not cry. You did not linger at the sight of their fall. You moved on, because to remain was considered weakness. But feelings do not obey codes. And so, the Order became a garden of stoics, outwardly calm, inwardly cracking. Their serenity, carefully curated, was often a mask worn over silent grief. And those few who could not wear it, who loved too deeply, or broke too completely, either left the Order or fell from it. Let us now move, ever so gently, from the fragile interior to the rigid exterior, from the emotional cost to the philosophical demands, from love and loss to doctrine and obedience. The Jedi were governed not merely by philosophy, but by law, a dense and unyielding doctrine that wove itself into every hour of their lives. At its center stood the Jedi High Council 12 Masters, robed in formality, seated in a circle high above the Coruscant skyline. They made decisions on training, discipline, missions, and broader galactic affairs. Their word was final. They were not elected nor challenged. To question the Council was to question the Order itself. For a Jedi, obedience was not a virtue, it was an expectation. A Jedi Knight could be summoned across the galaxy at a moment's notice. No mission could be refused. No hesitation shown. Whether negotiating a border dispute or quelling a planetary uprising, the Jedi went where they were sent. And when the missions became morally uncertain, such as mediating slavery, seizing disputed artifacts, or supporting unpopular regimes, they were still expected to comply, without emotional entanglement. This rigid structure worked, for a time. In the Old Republic's early centuries, Jedi independence allowed them to serve as neutral arbiters, but gradually, their autonomy eroded. Political leaders grew bolder in their demands. The Senate began to view Jedi not as partners, but instruments. The Clone Wars marked the final shift. Jedi were given command of clone battalions, living soldiers bred for war, conditioned to obey. Suddenly, the Jedi were not just peacekeepers, but generals. Few had ever studied strategy. Fewer still had trained for battlefield command, and yet they led troops into battles, stormed enemy compounds, and issued orders that sent men to their deaths. It was a transformation that many Jedi accepted with quiet discomfort. Ahsoka Tano once described the feeling of dissonance, how she would lead troops into combat by day, then sit in silent meditation by night, told to center herself while others mourned the fallen. Some Jedi adapted, others dissented, but few dared speak publicly. The Jedi Code demanded obedience, and obedience was often indistinguishable from silence. Even when suspicions arose, when Anakin grew unstable, when the Senate accumulated more emergency power, when the dark side stirred like a cold wind through the Force, the Council debated cautiously, slowly. Their language was cloaked in diplomatic phrasing. Their moves were delayed by consensus. Even as the galaxy teetered on the edge of tyranny, the Council chose patience over protest. And so the Jedi became entwined in the very machinery they had once stood apart from. Palpatine, the Supreme Chancellor, understood this. He courted Jedi Council while quietly undermining their credibility. He framed them as both elite and aloof guardians of a doctrine that no longer fit the modern galaxy. And when he struck, when he issued Order 66, no Senate vote was required, no hearings, no debate. The Jedi were swept away, not just by blasters, but by centuries of obedience to a structure that had made them brittle. Their downfall was not sudden. It was gradual. Layer by layer, freedom gave way to protocol, morality to politics, wisdom to routine. And when the storm finally broke, the code that once held them together could no longer shield them. Let us now drift from these cold halls of doctrine and descend once more into the hidden costs of their exile, the solitude of survival, and the heavy quiet of being the last. The fall came swiftly. One moment, the Jedi were scattered across the Starson missions, on front lines, seated in temples of learning. The next, they were being hunted, not by ancient enemies or dark sorcerers, but by their own troops-clone soldiers bred to serve them, now executing a single, absolute command. Order 66. Many Jedi never drew their lightsabers. They were caught mid-meditation, mid-sentence, mid-step. Some fled, fewer survived, and those who did, vanished. The age of the Jedi was over. What remained was exile. Obi-Wan Kenobi escaped to Tatooine, a dry, lonely world of twin suns and empty sand. He took no title, no allies, no mission. He built a small shelter and watched over Luke Skywalker from a distance. He spoke to no one, wore plain clothes, let the world forget him. He went by Ben. Each day, he walked the dunes. Saturday, in the shade of stone canyons, listened to the wind, and waited. For what? He wasn't always sure. Redemption, perhaps, or death, or the distant hum of a lightsaber never ignited. His days were marked not by battles, but by silence. Elsewhere, Yoda fled to Dagobaha's swamp planet, thick with mist and rot. His hut was carved from the twisted roots of ancient trees. He lived with insects and damp earth. No conversation, no contact, just the soft hum of the Force beneath the mud and vines. The great Jedi Master Once, the head of the Council, became a hermit, surrounded by decay. Others wandered. Quinlan Vos vanished into the Outer Rim, changing names and methods. Ahsoka Tano abandoned her saber and posed as a mechanic. She walked through cities where no one recognized her, helped quietly, loved carefully, and trusted almost no one. For all of them, exile was not only physical, it was internal. They carried the weight of loss, friends, students, identity. The failure of an entire order rested like dust on their shoulders. They questioned not only their choices, but their very beliefs. Had the Jedi Code made them strong or blind? Had detachment made them wise or cold? There were no answers, only days that passed like shadows. Many exiles buried their sabers. Some dismantled them. A few refused to ever use them again. It was not shame, it was grief. The kind of grief that lingers not in tears, but in the hollow spaces between breaths. The galaxy moved on. Children grew up hearing that the Jedi were traitors, that they tried to overthrow the Republic, that the Empire saved order from chaos. Statues of Jedi masters were torn down, archives were sealed, holocrons hidden. The Force itself became a whisper in forgotten corners of cantinas and crumbling temples. And yet, in the most quiet of places and forest moons, desert outposts, moonlit cliffs, some remembered. Some whispered old names. Some felt the pull of something ancient and still alive. The Jedi did not end in fire. They ended in solitude. Exile was not punishment. It was a kind of ghosthood, living but not seen, moving but not belonging. But even in exile, the Force stirred. And in that quiet, the seeds of something new, something different, waited. Let us now step slowly into our final segment, where myth meets reflection. Let us ask not only what the Jedi were, but what they meant, and what their legacy quietly leaves behind. Long after the Jedi were gone, the galaxy did not forget them. Not entirely. On remote worlds, old villagers spoke of warriors cloaked in silence, who once ended wars without bloodshed. In the corners of marketplaces, children whispered stories about glowing swords and impossible feats. Most dismissed them as myths, but some listened. The Jedi became legend, a word spoken with awe, but not clarity, a mystery wrapped in robes and restraint. Their legacy, like the Force they served, was subtle. To some, they were failures dogmatic, detached, complicit in their own downfall. To others, they were martyrs, guardians of peace, lost to a storm they could not foresee. But to most, they became symbols, not of what was, but of what might be. Even the Jedi themselves, those few who lived to see the legacy unfold, began to wonder. Had the Order misunderstood its own role? Had it clung too tightly to rules? Had it confused serenity with silence? Luke Skywalker, born decades after the Temple's fall, wrestled with these questions. He sought to rebuild the Jedi, not as they were, but as they could be. He studied old texts, walked among the ruins, spoke to the Force in solitude, And in doing so, he learned something the old order may have forgotten, that the Force is not merely light or dark, not law or chaos, but balance. That love is not always weakness. That emotion, though dangerous, is also a source of truth. That perhaps a new kind of Jedi could rise, one that honored the past but did not live in its shadow. Still, the ruins remained, temples worn by wind and time, statues overgrown with moss, holocrons flickering with uncertain light. And in these spaces, one could still feel it, that gentle hush, that ancient pull, the quiet sense that someone had once stood here, long ago, waiting, listening, hoping. In the end, the Jedi did not leave monuments. They left memory. Not all of it noble, not all of it just, but all of it human. They were not gods. They were people, caught in a storm of ideals, war, duty, and doubt. And their legacy, imperfect as it is, lingers in every corner of the galaxy, in the child who reaches out to help another, in the whisper of a saber's hum, in the stillness before dawn. Let us now, very gently, return to ourselves, to our quiet rooms, our soft pillows, and the comfort of knowing that we are not bound by codes, that we can remember without fear, love without silence, dream without doctrine. Let us close this story with calm hearts, and rest. And so, we have walked the silent halls of the Jedi Temple. We have stood beside warriors cloaked not only in robes, but in duty. We have glimpsed their rituals, their burdens, their hopes and their fall. They were not what legend claims. They were not flawless sages, nor emotionless guardians. They were human, even when they strove not to be. They made mistakes. They hurt. They endured. And still, they tried to hold back the tide of darkness, tried to live by a code that asked too much, tried to bring balance to a galaxy that was always shifting, always hungry, always reaching. Now, in the deep hush of night, as you lie still and the world fades around you, let their story soften in your mind, not as a tale of heroism or tragedy, but as a gentle meditation on imperfection. Perhaps there is something to learn in their silence, something in the space between peace and passion, between legacy and letting go. And perhaps, like the Jedi themselves, you too can release the weight of the day. You need not be perfect. You need not follow a code. You are here. That is enough. Let your breath slow. Let the galaxy recede. Let the stars drift past your window, unnoticed. Let sleep come like a calm tide, like a whisper in the Force. You are safe. You are still. And the story, for now, is done. Fade to black. Music. A final soft chord. Then silence.